Hi, I'm Nathan Pierce. This is the first episode of REDtalks, where we have ranting engineers on DevOps. And for my first guest, a good friend of mine, Hitesh Patel. Hitesh, give a quick introduction to yourself.
Hi, Hitesh Patel, solution architect for F5 Networks.
Now, Hitesh, can you explain to me why next to you I can see both Tabasco and a fan? So you like it hot and you like it cold?
Well, this is from my lunch, and I don't think food is food unless you put Tabasco on it.
Agreed.
And the fan is because I live in Texas, and every now and then I got to turn it on because this office gets warmer than the rest of the house. But I can't do it right now because I've got so much paper on my desk that if I turn the fan on, it would just fly everywhere.
So we're spanning the country right now. I'm coming to you from California. We've got Hitesh out there in Texas. But we're not talking about distributed communications across the continent today. We're talking about sharing stuff for free. And Hitesh, you're quite an advocate for doing this. And tell us, where do you like to share your information?
I like to share, well, if it's work information, it's GitHub, right? That's where I put pretty much everything, along with things like F5's Dev Central community and things like that. But really, a lot of the work, a lot of the things that we're working on are going to GitHub as we're working on them. In the chain of releasing supportable, rock-solid solutions, as we're working on these things, we like to throw everything we can on GitHub nowadays to get it out to F5 customers and to people in the DevOps community as fast as possible.
So just on something you said there, this isn't an alternative strategy in any way. You're just handing out things earlier to solicit feedback and maybe help people while we go through the same support processes we've always gone through. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely, right. So the goal is here to expose consumers of F5 things, whatever services or whatever things you're using F5 products for, give you a faster access to things that we're working on and kind of bleeding edge, not just code, but material of all sorts. So we've posted things like labs and PDFs, Postman collections, all the stuff that we're working on is designed so that we can get it out on GitHub and get it to customers as fast as possible. And then, the machine of F5, the big machine that is there and is still working every day in terms of getting supportability wrapped around that, making that official parts of the product, getting that released, getting all of that tested, all of that stuff still happens. We're just opening up the curtain a little earlier now. In fact, as early as possible, I would say, because as soon as I get done with something and it satisfies the Hitesh test of okay, which is varying levels of success sometimes, but that's when it goes out on GitHub. And it gives us the ability for customers to actually participate in the development process for solutions and for things that we're working on. We've had customers that have done a pull request and contributed. They've given us feedback early on in the process so we can adapt the solutions that we're delivering. Once they come out of that big F5 machine, we know that they're going to work in customer environments.
Can you tell me why you picked GitHub? I mean, we still do a lot of sharing of information. We have a lot of great forums and Q&A sections within Dev Central. What is it that attracts you to GitHub?
So first, it integrates with my work process, right? So I use 5 different operating systems. I have laptops, desktops. I have cloud-based systems. I can use Git from anywhere, and I can use that to get stuff out quickly. And more so, it's content in terms of source code or things that are more programmability related. We still want to wrap articles and training curriculums and full-blown content around that, and that's what we do on Dev Central, right? We take and we reference everything that's on GitHub, but actually build rich content around that on things like Dev Central with articles and training curriculums, stuff like that, videos like this, podcasts, all that stuff. So it's really combining the two. I think for me, Git is an evolution, right? So I remember back in the day, I used RCS on Unix systems, and then we moved to things like CVS, which was RCS with a network interface. And then you had things like Subversion. So I've gone through the iterations of revision control systems, but Git and GitHub in particular is where the community is living. It's not just GitHub, by the way. So we're doing things on Stack Overflow. We're integrating with things like Markdown, REDtalks. All of these things are in scope. So when we say GitHub, really, I would expand that to saying open ecosystems for the DevOps community. And frankly, I use it because it's easier than everything else. I can integrate it with whatever form factor thing that I'm working on, whether it's on my laptop on a plane or whether it's a Linux OS, Windows. All these tools are available to me whenever I'm developing things, and I can get it quickly out to the people that need it.
So from my own observations, I mean, you mentioned a few other places like Stack Overflow there as well. And from my observations, like Dev Central's got a lot of, F5 customers solving things and fixing even applications that have already been deployed. And, how can I use an iRule that can do payload transformation to help an app work that didn't work on deployment time? But then these other communities you mentioned, that's a lot of people who may not even actually heard about F5, but want to solve these same problems as well. So is that another good reason to kind of be out on these platforms to reach the audiences we haven't traditionally reached?
Yeah, absolutely. I go through these communities all the time. I participate in a lot of the forums myself, just from the work that we're doing. But OpenStack in particular, we're a big partner of OpenStack, and we participate very actively in the community. Just to give an example, right? Our development folks for OpenStack, our internal F5 development folks, use Slack, which is, when I found that out, I was like, I'm having trouble getting these guys on email. What's going on? And then somebody finally said, like, why don't you join the Slack group, dude? And that's how I communicate with them now. I don't ever send emails to our OpenStack developers. I talk on Slack because that's the tool they use. The key thing here is, I think it really, I guess the ecosystem you use does kind of tie you to some set of tools. But from an F5 perspective, what we're saying is we just want to get our functionality and our value out to as many people as possible. And these are the communities that we've seen where people are interacting. I'll go on these communities all the times and see crazy solutions to some of the simplest things that we could do, right? So you have people that are sticking together like mod rewrite and Apache with Nginx and HA proxy and stuff like that. And I'm like, guys, we could solve this problem for you in a much simpler manner that's operationally feasible. It's just that we have to be a part of that community, and that's what we're diving headfirst into. I don't even say that we're working on it. We're actively there already, and we try to pull some of those folks back to Dev Central. So when we post content, I'll link back to a Dev Central article and say, hey, here's an article. It tells you how to do this. Here's an iRule. In fact, there's a debug, HTTP debug iRule on my GitHub repository. It's been there for 2 years. That does HTTP debugging. It's an iRule. It's an F5 specific thing, but it's on GitHub and it's managed through that, and we do updates and everything to it from that through that mechanism. So
I remember going to GitHub Universe, their annual conference. I went to their first one last year, and it was really interesting the way they position themselves. They don't call it a developer community. They call it social coding.
Yep.
I found that really interesting, kind of bringing that concept of like, your Facebook or Instagram type thing into programming world, and to reach the new influencer within our customer base. Often they're not going to read the white paper. They're not going to follow maybe a webinar. They're going to go and type into Stack Overflow what they think it's called, and if they don't find it, they'll try and write their own version in maybe some Python, and then they're stuck with supporting that for the rest of their lives. So, yeah, I think, we're definitely not, moving away from the people we've always sold to and helped and supported and worked with. It's a new influencer that's come into the way infrastructure is provided and consumed that we have to address on top of the way we've always done things. And to me, this is like the best way to move forward on that, is to be sharing things on Stack Overflow and on GitHub. I'll put my hand up and be honest, the 201 series I've been writing, most of the times I get stuck, I go straight to Stack Overflow. That's where I find out how to get that bit of JavaScript that I just hadn't done before. So we're even users of this service that we're sharing back to as well. So I just think this is a really an awesome evolution of the way that we need to be working, especially when our traditional NetOps guy, who might, typically the person who's been the big IP operator until now, is now being tasked with providing those services programmatically to their new customer, which is actually the DevOps toolchain operators.
Yep.
So how can we do that provisioning without a person being involved? Well, actually, the best way to reach a lot of these guys, because they're solving all of their problems on these communities like GitHub and Stack Overflow, is that we start publishing our solutions to GitHub and Stack Overflow, because they're not in the habit of going to a vendor to find out if that's possible. The fact is, it is possible with F5's technology and all of our APIs. We just need to share that on the right platform to reach those people.
Yeah, so it's one of these things. My background, I was in the app dev world for a long time.
Wait a minute, Hitesh. I'm just going to roll up my sleeves. I think it's going to be more about a cultural conversation.
Ask me.
Technical. So
there you go.
Hitesh, the sleeves are up.
You're in your fancy French cuffs over there.
All right, talk code, everybody. Talk code.
So coming from the app dev community and working, I worked with Linux in its infancy, right? When Linux wasn't a thing. Linux was a project by some guy from, from Europe, right? I really grew up in the industry with the methodology that's now moving to the network side of things. And I think one of the biggest challenges for F5 is breaking out of that we're a network vendor. What we really are is a bridge between these two disparate worlds of app and network. And we do things for the application, very application-specific things, but we do them at network speed. We do them with the reliability that you need from an infrastructure device. But what I will say is none of this is unfamiliar to me, because I've been using these forums, as you said, for my entire career. I've always, if you go and look out in there and you can know the right handles to look for, you'll find posts for me going back to the early 90s on forums that are still archived out there, because this is how we did things early in the days of Linux, early in the days of open source. It was all mailing lists and things like that where interaction was happening. That moved to online communities, and that's now evolved into these tool chains. App developers, I think I'm an app developer, so anybody that knows me from F5 knows that if they ask me a problem, I'm going to say, well, I've either got an API or an iRule or a bit of code that I can write to solve that problem. And my methodology is I've got to extend that to the actual app developers that are out there and say, hey, don't go think that the only way to solve your problem is to go and write your own code or write something. That's always a solution. That could be a solution. It may not be. But there is probably a device in your environment. A lot of the people we interact with are already F5 customers, but they're people we don't ever talk to. They're just not network people, so we don't really interact with them on a daily basis. What they don't realize is that there's a very capable device already in their environment, or maybe something they could spin up quickly that could solve this problem and make it really easy to interact with and maintain for a production environment. So I think it's cool, man. I stepped away. I became a network guy for a while, but I'm actually getting back to my roots now. I do more development work than network work nowadays. It's really all about that part of the industry right now, and that's what I'm excited to be a part of. Yeah,
it's cool times, and just I want to just go back to that point of. It's a new influencer that we're talking to in addition to the people we've always been working to. This isn't some kind of shift we've taken at F5. It's just a new route that we can share solutions to. And I think a great example of that is actually the 3 types of accounts that you'll find if you go and search F5 right now. In fact, there's 4, I think, now. 4 types of accounts you'll find on GitHub if you look up F5. There's the F5 kind of corporate one where, it's things that were written by F5 development, tested by F5 development. But we want to share them out because we want people to be able to fork those examples and extend and do their own thing. Then next we have the F5 Dev Central account. And it's highly likely the things shared on there were written by F5 people, but they're not going through the level of testing that our hardware and software might go through that was developed, that has a support contract wrapped around it. Then you've got your account and my account, which is, like you said, I think the testing domain of that code is within the laptop I'm currently talking to. And that's it, and it might get tested once. But it's some cool ideas, and we like to just share that as we're writing it. I mean, the amount of times I publish a first 0.1 version, and 80% of it is fairly questionable. You can see where I'm going, and it might be interesting to someone. And then the fourth type is very non-F5, but if you search F5, I'm often amazed. I try and do it like once a month, and I just see customers sharing things like, a new chef configuration that someone's done, or I actually found someone wrote a chatbot coffee script.
Yeah, I saw that.
GitHub's Hubot, so that they can ask their chatbot, hey Hubot, tell me about the status of my pool members, and it comes back and it lists all what's going on with the applications. We keep finding things like that out there, and it's actually really awesome. And that doesn't happen if you're an organization that keeps everything inside and just publishes the white papers. You need to show and prove your capabilities and get it out there these days to really be taken seriously. So I just wanted to sort of highlight that those multiple levels of accounts that are out there, there's still things for the traditional buyer, but then there's a lot that's coming out on top of that for the people who want to start tinkering with the functionality now while they're waiting for those things to end up, potentially even getting baked in as official supported features.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll tell a story about some of the stuff that's on my repository there, right? So we've got an IAP up there we use for automation, for service deployment automation. And when we started that,
before you go ahead, IAPs are F5's layer 4 to 7 services templates. So you can deploy a template, which can potentially save you a good week or two of work. They're re-entrant, so yeah, they are life-changing. Would that be the right word?
It changed my life. I do this all day, every day. So anything I can use time is good.
So go ahead. This IAP that you're writing at the moment, this service template.
Yeah. So that started. That IAP started as a response to a customer engagement. Right. We were in a customer engagement and we were trying to get something working for a customer, and that's where all of that actually started. And that thing's evolved. So you're mentioning, the tested on your laptop, right? And that's where we started with that IAP. It was me over a weekend writing some code to help an engineer at an account, right? That we were trying to solve a problem for a customer. And it's funny because if you look back in the commit log of that, you'll see how that's evolved into a full-blown software package. And that's just on my personal GitHub account. But if you look in there, there's a whole test dev framework. In fact, every time I commit to that, we have, Nathan knows this, but people listening may not know, we have an internal system for where we're able to, basically it's a private cloud for us, so we can go in and create deployments and blueprints and things like that. Well, there's a blueprint right now that's running all the time. I have to go and hit the extend button every 2 days to keep it running. But it goes in and actually looks at the GitHub commit log, and it runs the test framework. So when I commit code, we have our own system. It's an F5 internal system. It's not sanctioned really in any way by anyone official, but I use that, and it pulls down all the code commits, and it tests across 4 different versions of Big IP. It runs the entire test framework, and all of that is in GitHub. Now, that all started as a couple hundred lines of Tickle, and now has evolved into thousands of lines of code with a test framework and everything. And I like to look at that and say, we started with something simple, and this is a full-blown software project now that's now going into the other parts of F5, right? And when we deliver that, in fact, when our folks have looked at that internally, they've seen it and said, wow, this is a full-blown package. This is something that we could take, wrap our support, wrap our full-blown testing methodology around, and we could deliver this as a solution to customers. So the idea started as a very tactical thing that we need to solve, but has turned into this huge strategic thing for us. In fact, we talk about that IAP all the time internally and to customers as an example of how much power there is in what you said, social coding. Most of the functionality in that has come from customers interacting with me directly on GitHub. I've never talked to those customers face-to-face or even on the phone. I did meet 2 or 3 of them at Agility, our customer conference. So I actually met some of the folks that I've been interacting with through GitHub issues for the better part of a year. But I never spoke to any of them. I never had a meeting with them, but we were interacting every week and saying, hey, we tried this and we need this, or this didn't quite work right. Can we change it this way? And now we look at this, and this could be a full-blown product for F5 at this point, right? So I think that's a testament to the power of these things. And the best part about it is when we show that functionality, customers say, that is exactly what I want. And I believe it's right because customers were involved in the process. And that's the big part for me.
That's great, because your customer first and customer solution first attitude's not changed in any way. What's different is you're sharing it while you're developing it, and that's actually that's been better than any marketing campaign for, hey, look what we can actually solve. Because trying to pair up the right solution to the right problem can often be very difficult when the person stuck between the two hasn't been exposed to enough of each of them. And how are you ever going to match up the right technology? I mean, software is software. It can do anything. But it's which software, which problem should I use, and where, and to what extent should it be developed on that platform versus that platform? So the best way to try and answer those questions is do like what you've done. Throw it out there so people can see exactly what that does, and can they extend it? Can they suggest an idea to you which may take a month or two, or could just be trivial that you can throw in that afternoon and commit, and then everybody wins and we're all happy. So I think that's actually a really great example of the whole social coding phenomenon that's growing now. I mean, there's even people now that won't take development jobs if they can't use their tools of choice. That's the extension now. And I mean, like 4 or 5 years ago, I remember reading about people wouldn't take certain jobs unless they could use the laptop brand of their choice or the cell phone of their choice. But now it's come even right down to tools. People, it's become more cultural of how they want to participate in this social coding era. The Stack Overflow survey every year just amazes me. Now it's more than half of people writing JavaScript never actually went to school to learn JavaScript. Like, they've learned through social coding platforms. They might not have the same fundamentals that you got from your computer science degree, or what is it you got? You're a Bachelor of Finger Painting and Broom Closets? What was it?
Bachelor of Broom Closet Maintenance and Candy Eating. Well, we could add beer drinking, but I don't know if that's appropriate.
That's not appropriate to talk about beer drinking, especially on the first episode, Hitesh. So, the problem is this is a live broadcast, so I don't know how to take that out of this. So we didn't just talk about beer drinking on the first episode. Well done.
Where do you think all the good ideas come from?
Excellent. That's your inspiration. We're going to wrap it up there. That was really great to talk to you, and I just wanted to make this first episode more about culture. I mean, I think you and I could probably get right into nerdy stuff, roll those sleeves up all day long. But I think one of the often overlooked parts of this change to the new influencer within organizations, where the pressure on infrastructure is coming from non-infrastructure teams, it is cultural, and it's actually enabling people we've always talked to work with these other teams versus just leaving them out to dry, and having to try and keep up with that pace of the automated deployment. It just doesn't work. It doesn't scale. So thanks for your time today. Hopefully, can I commit to having you on again sometime in the future?
Sure, man. Yeah. Anytime.
We'll talk about whatever new app or bit of code or...
Oh, we got lots of cool stuff to talk about.
Yeah. How you automate your toaster between now and then.
I've been looking for that. I got a IoT electric plug, and so I figured out a bastardized way to do it is jam it so that it's constantly on, and then control the power to the plug. Oh, so put a fork in your toaster and this is your thinking. I prefer a rubber band. Well, that's why I have this, actually, is I actually tried to duct tape it down. So there you go, and that's probably the appropriate one. If you do take things from GitHub that are not from official accounts, maybe you should test them yourselves first before production. Yeah. Thanks so much, Hitesh, and we'll catch up soon. Hope you have a great day. All right, you too, man. Thanks. Cheers. This has been the first episode of REDtalks. You've been listening to Hitesh Patel and Nathan Pierce. Thanks for listening.